You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. You know, I was the new Daredevil show is out on Disney Plus, and the Born Again series. It's the second highest rated series, only behind Miss Marvel, since Disney has started doing these kind of things. And I thoroughly enjoyed the first season, and I've been looking forward to the second season starting. And let's just say, whether intentional or otherwise, but I'm willing to place a bet that I know what the answer is. There are some parallels between what is going on in that show and what is going on in real life. Case in point, the Kingpin, one of the most notorious villains in New York City in that universe, is currently the mayor of New York City. He won it legally um, through an election. Since winning that election, in an effort to crack down on crime, law and order, he has started an unmasked Virgin Army called the Anti-Vigilante Task Force that is going around and brutalizing the citizens of New York under the expectation that the people that they are brutalizing may be vigilantes or may know people that are vigilantes, which is ironic to say the least. What sticks out to me, though, is season 2 starts off on a ship, and there's a bunch of guns on the ship, and Daredevil sinks the ship. Minor spoiler warning, it all happens in the first 5 minutes of the first episode. And it comes out that there is probability that the weapons on the ship are related to the mayor of New York City. And they were like, if it gets out that the mayor is in any way related to these gang-like crimes or running weapons across the city of New York, well, this could be the end of his term. And I was sitting there and I was like, well, if the Epstein list didn't do it, I doubt there's going to be anything on that ship that's going to be able to do it either. And it's crazy. I was chatting with a friend of mine and she says to me, I don't have the kind of job that I take home with me, but it's funny that everything you watch immediately becomes material for the show. And I was like, well, when something is smacking you that hard in the face with such an obvious parallel, it's pretty difficult to avoid. 920-281-1150. If the sitting president of the United States were found to have ties to an ammo shipment on a boat that was making its way to America, would that be enough to convince MAGA to not vote for him? Ironically enough, like, I'm not even doing this as a bit. Like, I genuinely don't think that would be enough. Like, given the things that haven't done it, I find it hard to believe that that would be the thing that does it. If anything, the NRA would probably put out a press release talking about how excited they are to have a pro-weapons legislator again. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm probably not. We've got a lot to jump into here today. I want to start on the state level because something similar to what I talked to you guys about, like in regards to mainstream media and their coverage of Israel-Palestine. And once you get knocked off the course, you're just like, okay, well, I can never take you at face value anymore. I kind of am dealing with that as well with the Wisconsin GOP, specifically in regards to the SAVE Act. They keep trying to present this as basic voter ID law, a basic voter ID law that 80% of the country is behind, and it's those dastardly Democrats that won't allow it to be passed. Meanwhile, even a cursory dive into what the SAVE Act, or the Save America Act for that matter, would do to the voting population shows you that this goes well beyond any type of voter security measures. And the fact that the entire Republican Party is willing to misrepresent what that bill is really prevents me from ever trusting anything that I see them come across again. And I do have to say that they are very coordinated when it comes to messaging discipline. For instance, over the last 24 hours, and I do believe the Nazi salute and moron has something to do with this, but my Twitter feed has been inundated with right-wingers talking about how excited they are about the prospect of Tom Tiffany eliminating the emissions tests for cars. Now, I understand this never ending war against the environment. I'm not taking a stance on it. I don't care. I don't know enough about cars to know whether or not they can pass emissions tests regularly or not. I have not dove into this in any kind of meaningful way. What I do know is this in no way is going to address the concerns that so many people of Wisconsin have with the trajectory that we are on, whether it's socially, economically, or any of the other answers. Yet that story is funneled in front of me more than anything else. Well, I should say, more than one other story as well. A very anti Governor Evers sentiment surrounding the idea that he did not allow for a scholarship plan to be developed that would benefit not just the private voucher students, but also the public school students. I thought Governor Evers was a teacher. I thought he was the pro student governor. Why is he doing this? And so, of course, because of the way the SAVE Act was covered, because of the way the Save America Act is covered, I'm sitting there reading right winger after right winger after right winger who really have made it clear they don't particularly care about funding education. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. That's fine. That is your prerogative. But don't expect me to pretend that the elected officials have any interest in actually funding education in a meaningful way, outside of course, private education, which, as I've covered ad infinitum, there it is. No matter what private school voucher plan you pick, 3/4 of the public money goes to families that already had their children in private school. So you have a population of people that already make enough money to send their kids to a private school, and we are now funneling more of our tax dollars into their pocket. Sounds like trickle down. So when it comes out that this scholarship plan was devised to help both public and private school kids alike, well, it piqued my interest because that doesn't sound like the Governor Evers that I have known over the course of the last 3 years and change that I have lived out here. And so I wanted to get to the bottom of why he would veto something like this, what was actually included in the bill. And to be perfectly frank, I wanted to see exactly how it was being misrepresented because I've been doing this job long enough to know that that's exactly what was taking place. Straight from the Wisconsin Examiner. A provision in the federal tax and spending law signed by President Donald Trump in July of 25 will provide a dollar for dollar tax credit of up to 1,700 people or $1,700 to people who donate to qualifying scholarship granting organizations. Donations to organizations are used for educational expenses, including tuition and board at private schools, tutoring, and books. The provision created the first major federal program to allocate public money towards private school tuition in the form of tax incentives. Republican lawmakers, as well as conservative and school choice advocacy groups, have advocated for Wisconsin's participation in the program, highlighting that the funds could be used for costs for public school students, including tuition, as well as for private school students. However, governors are the ones responsible for opting their states into the program. They have until 2027 to do so. Governor Evers has a statement out there right now, straight from his press secretary. This nationwide voucher program has no student achievement record metrics, no school accountability measures, no minimum or maximum scholarship size, no certain end date, and no cap on how much the federal government can spend. Republicans in Washington have given private vouchers expansion carte blanche to run roughshod over public education in this country and a blank check to do so at taxpayer expense, clearly without any regard for whether it actually does what is best for kids. As a former science teacher, principal, superintendent, state superintendent, and a son of the state that created the nation's first ever private voucher program, I have spent decades of my life watching the impacts that draining public funds from public schools to fund private voucher school programs instead has had on kids, schools, and public education here in Wisconsin, making his statement pretty clear that he does not actively trust the Wisconsin GOP to allocate these funds in a meaningful way to public school students. And this looks like an opportunity for people to write off $1,700 additional dollars off of their taxes in the name of funneling it to the people wealthy enough to already get their kids into private school. Sounds like trickle down economics. I have a solution, though. In the name of reaching bipartisan agreement, I would like to extend an olive branch. Fun fact, Olive Branch was the name of the first unpaid podcast I ever did. I did it with a right-winger who used to produce for me back in Pittsburgh. I obviously being myself, he being himself. We ended up becoming very good friends during my tenure working there. And as a result, we thought that we could be a shining example for how people on the right and left can get along in this political world. And figured that we would use our voices to try and do so. So I'm big on extending all branches. And I'm going to try and reach out to Republican elected officials here in Wisconsin to see if they'd actually be willing and entertaining this idea. Because since my arrival here, I have done countless segments highlighting that we are one of 10 states that has not accepted the federal dollars in the name of expanding access to what we here in Wisconsin call Badger Care, increasing the threshold at which people could qualify for it. This does not cost state funds, it costs federal funds. Thankfully, the high-minded conservatives in both our Assembly and our Senate have decided that we here in Wisconsin do not deserve those federal dollars for our health care, that you should shut up and die alone in a gutter if you can't afford your health care. Us and the rest of the Gulf of Luigi states, of course, your Alabamas, your Mississippis, your Arkansas, really don't want to be on a list with any of those Gulf of Luigi states, as I oftentimes state. So here's the compromise. Expand Badger Care, and we'll have a conversation about this. Let's put both things in the bill. Expand access to Badger Care and allow for the people of the state of Wisconsin to engage in trickle-down economics by writing off $1,700 worth of a donation to families already wealthy enough to get their kids into private school. However you want to use your money in order to get out of paying taxes on it is fine by me. But the idea that we're going to present this in a way that Governor Evers is doing this because he hates students or doesn't understand the benefits of it, well, that just isn't going to fly. And I realize that these people are much more coordinated than anything I would ever be able to accomplish because I do not play nice with Democrats. I just call it how I see it, which is every party member's worst nightmare. But I can see the ways in which the Wisconsin GOP is already misrepresenting what is taking place in this legislation. I can see the ways that it would immediately backfire on funding a program that has already been decapitated pretty thoroughly, even before I ended up getting here. And yet I am still willing to work towards finding a way to make this work for all parties involved. Republican Party, expand Badger Care. And then put a bill that expands Badger Care and allows for this. Nothing else. No something trans. No anything. Fill in the blank. No only what people can benefit from fleecing people while gambling. None of that. Two things in the bill. Expand Badger Care. Allow for this scholarship program to develop and allow for the wealthiest people to continue writing off taxes while we gut social programs. Give a little to get a little. And I would be interested in seeing who would be willing to come to the table and discuss that. Because I watched the Republican Party block our federal tax dollars from benefiting Wisconsinites. I guess they thought it would be better to ship it off to Argentina and Israel. I have watched them block our tax dollars going to the healthcare of red-blooded Americans in the name of trickle-down economics. And yet in this moment, they're so nervous about the well-being of the young people that we won't feed or do anything for. But we're definitely nervous about it and want to make sure that this tax cut gets through. Give a little to get a little. There's a reason why so many of you guys are retiring, and it's because you already see the writing on the wall. Give a little to get a little. Brian says, I don't know what you would do with an olive branch to Republicans in Wisconsin. It's what I just said. That would be the first step towards addressing this issue here. Give something that I would argue the overwhelming majority of Wisconsinites would want. And again, it in no way increases our taxes or does anything. It takes federal dollars that otherwise would be allocated to the military industrial complex and allows for more Wisconsinites to have access to Badger care. That should be a positive thing. The Wisconsin GOP, when the maps were gerrymandered, thought they knew better. We did not do it, along with all the worst states in the country. No offense, worst states. I know some of you guys listen to this show down there. You have to know, though. I'm not breaking news to you. um, give a little to get a little instead of trying to spread some kind of smear campaign to propagandize your voters. And for the record, I know it will work with a handful of them. I already understand that. But there's enough people out there looking for actual common sense solutions that I know not everybody is going to fall for it. You know what's interesting is there's an individual who started the Progress Chamber. He's a Blue MAGA Dem. His name is Adam Kavesinich. I came across him on social media. He tweets out, Democrats' worst cope is to think that we have been losing because of our candidate's race or gender. I commented on that Axios article yesterday saying, Democrats need to run a 55-year-old cis white Christian male and they will win the election. Not even focusing on policy at all, identifying strictly nothing other than identity politics because they don't want to look inward and actually do the things that so many people want to see. He goes on to say, we have been losing because our positions have put us well to the left of the average American. To which this was my response. Give me examples of that. Reagan-era taxes, increasing funding for police and ICE all 4 years under Biden, increasing military spending, no public option for medicine, record-setting oil and gas drilling, record-setting profits and CEO pay. Give me an example of Democrats to the left, and you guys will never guess what the responses were. Transgender surgery for minors, when the AMA and the majority of Democrats are against it. Both taxpayer-funded transgender surgeries for minors and biological males in competitive sports. I could keep going, but you guys understand the principle at this point. I can rattle off 7 or 8 different ways in which Democrats are very clearly to the right of center, and Republicans will immediately, they're coming to trans your kids you without even processing any of the information that you put out there otherwise. I realize that the Republicans know exactly who they're speaking to. And I'm sure Tom Tiffany will have "They're coming to trans your kids" draped all over his campaign at a time when he is voting to make your life more expensive with regularity. Don't fall for it, is what I'm asking for. Demand better. If something doesn't sound right, it probably isn't right. And when a governor who bills himself as the education governor comes out against something like a scholarship, in quotes, for people in school, when it seems pretty clear that it is a tax write-off and a handout to people that are already wealthy enough to send their kids to private school, maybe there's something else going on behind the scenes. And to that effect, I would like to continue this thought process about trickle down, the ways that it is dressed up in order to convince people they are not doing trickle down, and example 32,987 of exactly why trickle down is an economic system for morons propagated by St. Reagan that really people don't do a deep dive into figuring out exactly how it's fleecing you. If you guys have not seen the most recent manufacturing numbers, they're available on my social media pages, by the way. We're going to break them down on the other side. And after such a massive tax cut for the people who own these manufacturing companies, well, I have to believe increased salaries and job numbers are right on the other side of that decision, right? Right? We'll break it down on the other side. Outside the Box, Ben Comino's WHBY Political Voices Network. Listen, Wisconsin, it is not warm yet, and freezing nights and warm days means your sump pump is about to get a workout. You know, water damage is one of the main reasons why people call in home insurance claims. So do yourself a favor and just skip the headache altogether. Reach out to Tim Roush and his team. You can just use that free text line that I've been telling you about. Have them test your sump pump today. They can put your mind at ease and make sure that you're not dealing with this once a real problem starts. Head to timroushplumbing.com for that phone number and plenty more information about what could go wrong with your sump pump at this time of the year. That's Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. Sterline's on the YouTube chat here saying he works on cars for a living, supports emission testing. For the record, I don't have a dog in the fight. To me, though, when you're basing, like, it was just such a coordinated effort to get that information in front of me. And to me, that would be like running an entire campaign on canceling overdraft fees from the bank. Is that a net positive? Yeah, absolutely. Is it something that you would base an entire political campaign on? I would hope not. I would hope there would be some other factors being considered and that wouldn't be the make or break kind of conversation that you'd be looking for. For the record, I'm pro environment. I'd like to keep the environment rolling along here. So if emissions testing is an issue, then we need to make sure that it stays packed. The conservative talking point is that cars don't fail emission in the last 20 years. The way cars are made, they don't really fail inspections or emissions tests rather anymore. For the record, I'm coming from a state where you have to get your car inspected every year. And then you get a little sticker for it here. I've not got my car inspected since moving out here. I'll talk to my brother about it. He'll be like, "What? So you just that for all you know, something's going to fall off the bottom of your car." And I'm like, "Yeah, man, like they don't care. You don't have to worry about it." So like we're even more regulated than this state is here. Can't stress enough. Have not looked into it in any kind of meaningful way. Do not have an informed opinion. The whole point to me bringing it up was just the coordinated effort in which both the algorithm on Twitter as well as the Wisconsin GOP really kicked it into overdrive to make sure that it got in front of my face. Realistically, and I'll be frank with you, I've not seen a single pro-democratic tweet since we've gotten close to voting day here. We're a week away from voting for a number of local races, as well as the main one from a statewide perspective, the Wisconsin Supreme Court candidates. I've been seeing dozens of posts encouraging me to vote for Maria Lazar, showing people canvassing, showing door knocking, showing people excited, showing that she is by far the most moderate of the two. Yada yada yada, something about using the Bible to make her decisions. If that's moderate, then I don't want to be moderate. um there's a lot of issues with that woman. But I noticed that her face and her name are thrust in front of me way more than at a 10 times clip compared to what the Democratic candidate is. And to be perfectly frank, I noticed something very similar in the lead up to the election. And what's crazy is the Wednesday after election day, you went on Twitter and it was all cat videos and clips of movies and whatnot. And it's uncanny. It's absolutely uncanny. Um, how much the vibe just shifts. And like I'm sure I'm not the only one that notices it, but I feel like I kind of thread that needle between legacy style media by doing radio, but also being fairly active on socials these days. And I just notice things that I think a lot of people don't notice, and then I feel dumb. Um, but that because no one else can kind of see it the way through the lens that which I see it. But I am noticing that there is an active effort already to get Tom Tiffany in front of you, Maria Lazar in front of you, calling out Governor Evers for this scholarship situation here without any real effort to provide the opposite perspective whatsoever. So allow me to do so. Although since I won't pay that Nazi saluting moron $8 a month um to get extra exposure, it's only going to go so far on his website there. Now, I'm going to use his website to highlight exactly how stupid of an economic policy the Republican Party has been pushing on us for the last 15 months and realistically my entire life with the assistance of the Democrats. During the Biden years, and I made a video about this, but during the Biden years, people would highlight his manufacturing job numbers. And I'm willing to play devil's advocate here, especially in 2021, in the early part of 2022. There is definitely an element of bounce back in Biden's economic numbers, meaning that when Donald Trump was in office in 2020, the economy tanked because we decided to shut the entire world economies down for a little bit to assess how to deal with COVID. Can't stress enough, every time a MAGA posts about lockdowns and blames Democrats, you look dumber every time you do it. And I hope you're hearing me say this out loud and learn from your mistakes. Something tells me it's not a mistake. I can acknowledge that when a bunch of job numbers essentially go to zero, and then all of those industries begin to open back up, there's going to be an initial boom that isn't necessarily as a result of anything that any candidate would have done. It was just a matter of being president at the time when the bounce back happened. Now, I do think it's worth saying that there are certain mistakes that you could do to prevent that bounce back. Like if the Republicans had figured out how to highlight how I helped Democrats cheat in the election in 2020 and rigged the votes, allowing Joe Biden to win. Had Donald Trump come away in 2020, he might have instituted policies that prevented that bounce back, because we're going to get into that in just a moment here. So there's no guarantee that the bounce back happens. However, the overly inflated numbers of job growth, absolutely in part in the first 2 years of the presidency, have to do with coming back from a once in a lifetime health situation that we were all kind of blindly feeling our way through. 2023 and 2024 are very different years, though. You're no longer dealing with the bounce back at that point. That is as a result of Build Back Better. That's as a result of solar panel plants being built. That's as a result of microchip plants so we could one day build our prisons. I'm not saying all of these jobs are beneficial towards the betterment of society, but the jobs did exist, is my point. Since Liberation Day, you know, the day when we were finally going to experience economic freedom again, there has been a net loss since April of 25. We are a day away from the year anniversary of Liberation Day. 89,000 manufacturing jobs have disappeared since the levels that they were at April 1st. Short-term pain, long-term gain, ladies and gentlemen. No matter what Trump policy you pick, it seems like that's the motto. I'm sure any day now that gain is going to start. I'm very excited about it. But moreover, these job losses occurred while we were cutting taxes for the people that run the manufacturing plants, that run the meat packing plants. There we go. The meat packing plants that run all of these different major institutions that are laying people off. Manufacturing is just the tip of the iceberg. But since blue collar workers allege that Donald Trump is the blue collar president and that Democrats weren't doing anything for them, objectively, manufacturing jobs were being created all 4 years of the Biden presidency. Some of those years were as a result of COVID. Totally admitted. Right there with you. I've been saying it since you've known me. Also were created as a result of policy. Donald Trump turns around gives these people's bosses massive tax cuts, then they turn around and lay off a bunch of their workers or close their plants and send them overseas. Whether it's as a result of tariffs or just the fact that these people see an opportunity to make all of the money instead of just most of the money, these jobs are going away. By the way, this is a report coming from Donald Trump's Bureau of Labor Statistics, who he fired the chief of, still able to get information out there. 89,000 job losses since April 1st of 2025. There's no way to ignore the objective reality that A, Donald Trump is atrocious at creating jobs for Americans, barring some kind of massive turnaround that he in no way has been signaling that he has any interest in doing. And B, and more importantly, kind of piggybacking off of some things I said yesterday about the cost of beer at Dodgers games while they're firing employees and replacing them with robots, which we were told people's wages and keeping them low is the only way to keep our beer at the affordable price of $20 per glass. Well, it turns out that cutting these people's taxes also doesn't create jobs because they've done nothing but cut jobs since the moment that we've done that. What? Were the tax cuts completely offset? Did the tariffs raise the prices so high that the tax cuts weren't felt? Well, that's an interesting thing to claim given the record profits that we are seeing in every single industry since the Trump administration and even before then. We played a clip of an economist yesterday talking about how corporate profits as a percentage of the GDP have been over 9% the last 4 years in a row, from 2020, 22, 23, 24, and 25. The only time it was over 8% was in 1929. And we have done it for 4 years in a row. That is a Democratic trifecta in 22. That is a split in 23 and 24. And that is a Republican trifecta in 25. We've tried cutting their taxes. We've tried leaving their taxes pat. We've tried increasing the tariffs. We've tried leaving the tariffs at standing pat. Have we ever considered taxing these people? Could that be in the cards? Because it seems to me like any economic policy you put out there results in layoffs and creating jobs that are not paying people enough money to afford the basic necessities in life. Is there a policy out there that might accidentally allow the average American to do either of those things? 920-281-1150. Jeff says, Tom Tiffany has never had an original thought. During his time in the state legislature, he took his marching orders from Speaker Voss in the mining industry, in the federal government. He just followed House leadership and did his best to stay in good graces with Trump. Refuses to do any town hall meetings. I've been waiting for more than a year for Tiffany to meet with his constituents. Oh, I'll tell you right now, if he ends up on WHBY airwaves, it won't be on Outside the Box. Not for lack of trying, but I'll be honest, with people like him, I don't know that I could keep my professional composure. I barely do that as is when I'm just talking by myself. But yeah, I'm right there with you. And he has a Herculean task ahead of him because Donald Trump is not particularly popular. He does not have the same cachet that he once did surrounding people where you have to blindly follow in lockstep with what he is doing. Otherwise, you won't be able to win a Republican vote. He has to somehow keep the diehard MAGAs on his side while acknowledging that Trump's war of choice in Iran is making our life more expensive, that Trump's tariffs are resulting in job losses and making our lives more expensive, that the tax cuts have only resulted in job losses as opposed to job gains. And every single monthly job report is painting a more pessimistic picture than the one that came before it. This guy has a Herculean task in front of him, and I don't think he has the capacity to walk that line. I don't know that anybody does. I've got more thoughts on that, but we've got our first call of the day, maybe second. I can't remember. It's all running together. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Ben, how are you?
I'm all right. How about yourself?
Pretty good. I just want to say I agree with you on the tax cut stuff. It's feels like we could start targeting those people who are making, $1 to $2 million a year or more. I'll hang up and listen. I just want to know why you think saying that someone putting fries in a bag is an insult. And I'll hang up and listen.
Yeah, no problem. I don't know who that is. I like your southern drawl, though. But I don't think it's an insult. I use it as an insult for people that brag about how much money they make online. I appreciate the comment, though, nevertheless. Larry says, I had my car inspected yesterday in North Carolina. They made sure there was glass in the windshield, and that's about it. Total cost $1,630. That's kind of my point about the emissions test thing, is it feels fabricated. I don't necessarily buy into people's excitement about it, but that's just me, of course. Johnny says Democratic volunteer arrested in Florida. Okay, whatever. And Larry says, didn't Dave Ramsey say this is the best time for Americans to make money in a commercial on WHBY? It's funny if you're referencing the one where he talks about how capitalism is the best system available for people to pull themselves out of poverty right now without even kind of like that's just it. He surrounds himself by people that just do groupthink, and then he ends up saying like no one pushing back on the idea that Finland, Norway, Denmark, all these Scandinavian countries have the capacity for you to do so, and it's brought about by taxing wealthy people at a reasonable rate. I would love for somebody to have a chat with him, but you're going to get me in trouble, Larry, because anytime I talk about what's his name, Dave Ramsey, I end up getting in a lot of trouble on my emails. So yeah, I'm right there with you though. So that's just me, of course. But so the job numbers are clearly trending in the wrong direction. The trickle down economics isn't creating job growth. The tariffs aren't bringing any manufacturing back to America, and it's making our lives more expensive, despite the fact that they've been struck down. There comes a time when I would like to see the people that voted for this call a spade a spade. You can hate Joe Biden. You can acknowledge that he was Sleepy Joe, that he didn't know if he was governing in 2022 or 1992, and I'd be right there along with you. Jobs were getting created. Jobs were getting created, and there was an effort to crack down on 3% of the costs that were weighing us down. The Republican Supreme Court blocked any effort to address student loans. The Republicans in the House and Senate blocked any effort to address corporate greed in the oil and gas industry. The list goes on and on. There were good things happening. I defy you, other than, of course, there are no longer transgender athletes in the Olympics. Outside of that wonderful milestone for the American population, I would love a second example of what this Trump administration is doing that has you so excited about what's happening, that had you so livid 2 years ago. Because I would challenge that you don't have an answer to that question. You can talk about Sleepy Joe all you want, right there with you. He obviously had people surrounding him that at the very least weren't making life better, but was not resulting in the loss of jobs that we have been seeing since the Trump administration started. And realistically, every Republican administration since I was born has struggled in the job creation market. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. We have to squeeze one more quick break in here. We'll put a bow on this conversation before shipping off to the Strait of Hormuz to keep the conversation rolling here. So everybody stay right where you are. 920-281-1150. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY. Jerry says Dave Ramsey is not just about capitalism, it's capitalism and Jesus. I'm right there with you. I apologize for missing your text before, Jerry. The trolls are out in full force today. I picked some fights online with some Wisconsin GOP members, and it seems like they have taken to my YouTube channel and even calling the show to kind of throw monkey wrenches in it. So I apologize for missing your text there. You also have to realize I'm like Marty McFly, in that if you call me chicken, I'm immediately going to race Biff. And one of us is going to end up covered in manure. So I'm never afraid to share the post outside of anything outwardly derisive. But I don't think you've said anything wrong about Dave Ramsey in your assessment of things there. I have a field day with him, and as I always state, his concept of pay off debt and your life is going to be easy is accurate. It just completely ignores the fact that we are dealing with record level debt, and that Dave Ramsey couldn't even fathom the fact that a lot of people's car payments are probably more expensive than his college was. So that's kind of my issue with what Dave Ramsey is personally. Um, Insert angry emails here. And it's people like Dave Ramsey that push this myth about trickle down economics. That keep this lie going. As I've stated before, thankfully we were not as online as we were in the late 2000s and early 10s. But if you would have talked to a 22, 23-year-old Ben, I would have told you I'm a fiscal conservative and a social liberal. I think gay people deserve a right to exist just like everyone else. And I don't think racism even exists anymore. These are all things that I was saying at the time because I bought into the trickle down myth. I was like, yeah, obviously, if you cut taxes for the wealthiest people, it's going to go to the workers. And you know what's funny is the people that believe that, I genuinely do believe, would do it that way. And that's the reason you don't own your own business. And that's the reason I don't own my own business, is because the people that find themselves in those positions oftentimes will not take advantage of those kind of moments. They use it to pad their own profits, specifically in the large corporate entities, is what I'm talking about here. Very rarely does it actually make it back into the pockets of the worker. And now we aren't even seeing the jobs existing. Like I stated, Joe Biden maintained an unacceptable status quo of creating jobs that were not paying enough money. Donald Trump says, I see your jobs not paying enough money, and I raise you not as many jobs. And those are the two things that we're voting between. And the reason that it is allowed to persist that way is because roughly 1/3 of the nation is going to pretend that this is actually better than what was, despite the fact that they don't have any evidence to back up those claims. And I feel like this show has become a once an hour kind of thing of, here's another economic statistic to show you that all of the decisions that Donald Trump is making is having a net negative on the outcome of what we are dealing with here. Keep in mind, when you guys met me, it was September of 22. We are 5 months away from me being at the exact point of the Trump administration when you met me in the Biden administration. And I was not pulling my punches on the expectations of Joe Biden and the Democrats. Welcome to the other shoe on the other foot. We have to get out of here. Anna, I'm going to look your texts over on the other side. You sent me a question that has piqued my interest. We'll jump into the YouTube chat as well. And then we're going to the Strait of Hormuz. Or wait, are we? More after the news. All right, we've returned. Ben Cominos, Outside the Box, WHBY, Political Voices Network. Outside the Box is brought to you by Roush Plumbing and Remodeling, the plumbing and remodeling company the Fox Valley depends on. If you're just joining us, we started off a conversation talking about this bill that Governor Evers vetoed in regards to donating up to $1,700 into a quote unquote scholarship that can act as a tax write off that then was going to be applied towards private school funds. Essentially highlighting that it was just trickle down dressed up in a different way. I then took that info and we kind of ran with the trickle down for the first hour, highlighting the number of jobs that have been created since Liberation Day on April 1st, being the negative, specifically in the manufacturing industry, although everything outside of healthcare has been trending in the wrong direction. That's despite the tariffs, despite the tax cuts, despite everything else. I think it's worth highlighting that there are definitely some shortcomings there. And we're going to jump into the conversation about Hormuz in just a second. I do want to say, though, Anna actually sent me a back and forth here with one individual talking about that, the move from Governor Evers to veto that legislation. It says the argument is that tax dollars should not fund private schools, but that's not really the case. Tax dollars are funding educational choices. For every student in a private school, that's one less student in a public school. It's an even distribution of available tax revenue for student funding. To which Anna responded, "You and I both golf. You go to the public course and you pay a lower amount to enjoy a game of golf. But me, I think I should get to go to a country club. The problem is I can't afford the country club dues, so I'd like you, while you are going to the public course, to subsidize my private country club fee. Is that cool with you?" Something tells me that the original messenger probably didn't get back to her on that, because I think that's a fantastic way to set up something in a way that's much more easily understandable. Way to take what I did for 20 minutes and sum it down into about 90 seconds worth of content. That's very good work, but I absolutely love what I am reading there. And I do want to say, before I get into it, I've got one person who hits me up in the YouTube chat here who will not be quiet about Democrats and voter fraud, and more specifically, the lack of any evidence that any voter fraud existed outside of myself. I voted for Joe Biden 15 times in 2020. It stands out to me that, and this is partially the mainstream's fault, and I'll explain why. The Wisconsin Journal Sentinel, the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, rather, has an article out there right now. New Wisconsin polling paints a mixed picture of confidence in elections. I think that's putting it very nicely. The mixed picture is there's a bunch of people of varying levels of intelligence that will not accept that their boy, Uncle Donnie, lost by 8 million votes to Joe Biden because he was a trash-ass president from 2016 to 2020. Then Americans, with the goldfish memory that they have, watched Joe Biden not fix a lot of the problems quickly, and then listened to Donald Trump claim that he had the solutions for the problems that the Democrats were not addressing quickly enough. And now, almost 16 months into this administration, we are remembering again exactly how trash-ass Donald Trump is at being president. You know, in the second Bush term, he reached a net approval rating of 27% of people thought George Bush Jr. was doing a good job by 2006, which ultimately resulted in the legislative bloodbath that took place in 2006 as well as 2008. And in a time when people weren't paying as much attention, Democrats needed to figure out a way to take these supermajorities and not really do anything that progressives and people on the actual left wanted to see happen. Not an easy feat, and assuming things trend along the same lines again, it's going to be much more difficult this time around because there's a lot more people paying attention this time. But nevertheless, when you paint it as a mixed bag, as a mixed reaction to voter fraud in this country, I think that's doing it a disservice. There's a bunch of MAGA people that will not let 2020 go, And then there's everybody else who acknowledges the reality. And I will be the first to admit that Blue MAGA did not accept 2016 for a very long time. They blamed Russia for creating a bunch of memes that a 14-year-old wouldn't have fallen for tricking their grandparents into voting for Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. And that ultimately resulted in his presidency. I am not saying that it is a bipartisan issue or it is a partisan issue, but I am saying that only the looniest of the loons in 2026 are claiming that Elon Musk and Donald Trump stole the election in 2024 and we are moving on. And moreover, not a single MAGA has had a single thing to say about the 2024 election and its propriety. So when they wake up in 2026 and try and pull this, or when they try and pull it in 2028, I'm sure there will be media outlets that try and walk a line. This will not be one of them. It will be handled in the exact way that you expect, and everybody else can either pick a different show or embrace reality. If you didn't have an issue with 2024, shut the hell up about 2020 and shut the hell up about any future elections. Those are your choices. I'm looking forward to seeing which ones you pick. Paul hopped on, says, haven't people whose kids go to private schools been subsidizing the public schools for a year by paying property taxes? Absolutely. And their children also have the option to go to public school. They choose to pay extra for private school. I do not begrudge anybody making extra money that wants to do fancy things. I think I've told this story before, but I went to rich white people college. It was a private college. I got in because my SAT scores were baller and I had a solid GPA as well. And when I got there, I was known for my ability to write at my public high school. I'm like, oh, give it to Ben. He writes a hell of a paper. I went there, and the first paper I had to write, I got to pick the prompt. I got to pick the book. Like, it was basically like free form, but there had to be like a psychological pretext behind it. So I read the book Grendel, which is the story of Beowulf, but from the perspective of the monster. And I wrote an 8-page paper about whether or not Grendel was the way he was as a result of nature or as a result of nurture, based on the way that he was presented in that book. And I wrote it early, and I took it to my professor, and I asked for his insights, and he gave me insights, and I rewrote it again. Then I sent it to my parents, and I had them read it, and they were like, this is a good paper, good job. And then I handed it in, and I got a D. And all of my friends that went to public high schools all got A's and B's. And I realized very quickly I learned one way to write that was more uniform, but these people were coming at this from an entirely different perspective, and I was going to need to up my game if I was going to be able to compete with them going forward. There are elements of private school that absolutely give you an advantage. Oftentimes, being born into privilege and wealth gives you a lot of advantages, access to private school being one of them. That's fine. It's not my job to send your kids there, though. Anyway, that's my thoughts on how the private school voucher conversation works. So that's my perspective at the very least. Now, I do want to get into the international scene here, discussing what's going on with Hormuz. And if you guys haven't seen yet, if you guys value your sanity and appreciate not going on to Truth Social, allow me to pull it back up here. Of course, I minimized it. I didn't print it out. I don't have access to print these kind of things on that Truth Social site of his, so I just kind of have it on the phone here. All right. As per Donald Trump, doesn't look like there's a lot of caps here, so I don't have to yell things. All of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number one, buy from the U.S. We have plenty. And number two, build up some delayed courage, go to the Strait and just take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Go get your own oil. Now, putting aside all the objective lies that are included in that post right there, This is a slippery slope because I think we've talked about this before, but having been a kid during 9/11, I remember the era of freedom fries. I remember the era of freedom kissing. Hell, making jokes about the French and not having the guts to take part in warfare is still a trope that exists even to this day, some of which extending from the World War era, which okay, a little more well warranted, a bit dated, but a little more well warranted, but absolutely having nothing to do with 9/11. Why is that? It's because the French were the only country in NATO looking at the data saying it kind of feels like this WMD stuff is made up and there really isn't a philosophy or point to what anybody is saying or doing over there. We don't want to attach our names to this until we have a better understanding of what is going on. I would argue, with the benefit of hindsight, that every country that took part in the war on terror wishes that it had the foresight that France did in that particular moment. Flash forward to today, and we have a presidency that, depending on the day, will give you a laundry list of different reasons as to why we are doing what we are doing. Case in point, yesterday, Marco Rubio goes on TV, says, "We have clear objectives for this operation. We want the destruction of Iran's Air Force. We want the destruction of their Navy, the severe diminishing of their missile launching capabilities, and the destruction of their factories." Okay, great. I was of the impression we were there to end a nuclear program, we were there to end their support for terrorists, and we were there for democratic regime change. So it turns out that all the things they said 3 weeks ago are now no longer relevant, and they have a whole new laundry list of issues. By the way, fun statistic, last week, Iran fired more missiles and more drones than they did in the first week of this conflict. We're 2 weeks away from Donald Trump's 4 to 6 week timeline of when we were getting out of this, by the way. I'm holding my breath. I got a good feeling that he's going to end up coming through for us on that one. Trust me. Donald Trump's really never given us any reason not to trust him. So just ride along with this one here. But so when our NATO allies are like, yeah, dog, we're not getting involved in this until you give us any semblance of an actual cohesive game plan, and you don't have the DEI defense secretary going up on stage talking about how God ordained what is happening and all the crazy talk coming out of that white boy, maybe we'll be along for the ride. I do not begrudge, and this is coming from somebody that actually has issues with NATO, but not from the dumb MAGA reasons, but from an actual imperialist perspective. I have my issues with NATO and the way we've treated the global South over the last 70 plus years of human history that I think deserve a reasonable conversation. Of all my issues with NATO, the fact that they don't want to get involved in Donald Trump's obvious war of choice is not counted among those reasons that I hold against anything against NATO. That's just me. Of course, I welcome your thoughts on the matter. 920-281-1150, 920-281-1150. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, Cynthia in Florida on NATO. The first members of NATO, the heads of NATO were Nazis, number one. When Ronald Reagan, when one of his executive orders was to destabilize Yugoslavia, and you know what we did to them, that's number two. I marched with a sign that I made of Edvard Munch, the Scream, and I said, "Stop NATO." But you know, Europeans don't trust us, and I'm going to go back to the Obama administration. And when they sent Victoria Nuland over there, and she's in a phone conversation, which was taped, and said, "F the EU." Well, they hadn't forgotten it. They got dragged into this war in Ukraine. Ukraine was used. It cost them more money for everything. And now they're like, "No, we don't trust you, blankety blanks."
Yeah.
But I have a question. I sent you a text message. How in the world is the 82nd Airborne, which is largely an amphibious unit, how are they going to get to the shore?
Oh yeah, that's a big question being asked, and I might be reaching out to a general or a colonel that I've been speaking with on a separate podcast to see if he'd be interested coming on here, because realistically, and it's why I sometimes give Trump's over the top rationale a little bit of leeway, because in this social media world, in this hyper connected world, you don't want to lay out strategy. But the fact is, they're anticipating boots on the ground, and I have to believe there's an effort to put together some kind of welcoming party. I do not know what the game plan is to get these people on the ground. I'm not sitting in the back rooms. I'm not going to claim there's no idea, but I mean, it's not going to be pretty. I can guarantee that much. And it's a matter of having the people that know what the hell they're doing in the right positions. What's up?
Well, when I think about this, I remember when the Russians took over that Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and so the IAEA inspector was coming. So the Ukrainians had this bright idea that they would get, take these amphibious boats and land and rush to the plant and take it over before the IAEA inspector could come there. Well, Russia lit them all up. So
yeah,
that didn't work.
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, I appreciate the call, Cynthia. I'm right there with you. And I mean, to her point, Russia has been portrayed as the enemy for however long at this point. Fun fact, Israel has actually claimed a larger percentage of the land in Lebanon than Russia has claimed in Ukraine. How many of you are hearing that for the first time from a guy who does a local AM talk radio station and not from any of the national sources that claim to want to bring you the news and all this great information? So I say all of this to say, and to Cynthia's point there, when you see these kind of messages, you are now hearing claims that Donald Trump is ready to walk away from the Strait of Hormuz. And I made this joke when the conflict started, and I'm going to continue making it. I am 100% in favor of Donald Trump signing the Iranian nuclear deal that Obama had done, that the Trump administration tore up. I am completely fine with him signing, let's just do the thing that we already had in place, and watching MAGA all clap like the trained seals that they are for what a great, bright-brained 5D chess that this president is doing, and that liberals just don't understand. I would be fine with the intolerance of how inept that logic would be, as long as it meant that this ended. And the worst part is that even when it does end, we're not going to see any kind of immediate cessation in the costs. We're actually going to see it continue to go up for a while. As I mentioned to Landon during the local half hour, you can see farmers talking about the 70% increase in the cost of fertilizer. We are an agriculture state. What do you think we're going to see happen to our costs to run business and our prices? One of my favorite diners in my hometown closed earlier late last week. A friend of mine sent me a screenshot of it closing for good. I gotta believe this is part of that conversation. Eggs R Us was the name of it. Solid name for a diner. Great food. It's been open forever. It's closing now. There's a lot of places that have been open forever that are closing now because of the cost of living. Not exclusively Trump's fault, but the extra costs that we're about to incur absolutely are. And I wish it would be met with the same level of anger and animosity that Joe Biden inheriting an economy after a pandemic was met with. I'll never understand it. And I have more thoughts about this, but I would like to squeeze a commercial break in here. I did see we got a message from someone who just calls himself C7557 on YouTube. Tom Tiffany is useless. I am in this district and he bleeping sucks. Yeah, it seems to be a general consensus. Again, I think the blue wave that is inevitable coming in November, not because Democrats are good, but because Republicans are so uniquely bad. I think it's going to drag Tom Tiffany down with it as well, regardless of who the Democrats nominate. But time will tell, but I'm pretty optimistic that's going to be the case. Jaramani says, first time I've heard about Israel, and I consider myself pretty well informed. I've not supported Israel, but I have not supported Israel, but I didn't know that fact. I'm telling you, it's because the mainstream doesn't want you to know it, because keep in mind about how brainwashed, there's a chance some of you listening, it's probably one of your least liked things about this show, is that I have been anti-funding for Ukraine since the beginning, because the idea of painting anybody on the planet as innately evil or the bad guy, ignores the kind of stuff that we allow on a regular basis from our allies that have already said that they will not be contributing ground forces to Iran, despite embroiling us in this mess in the first place. But you're going to get me going on a whole other tangent at this point. Anna simply just says, though, the cost of those darn eggs. No, exactly. Exactly. And I mean, again, not to tangent too far off, but even that, I maintain it was that the liberals tried to weaponize it. Progressives were ahead of the curve on the cost of eggs. I interviewed Farm Action in 2023 about the cost of eggs. Flash forward to election season, and people were using the cost of eggs as shorthand for the entire economy. Then Donald Trump wins because nobody trusted Kamala Harris or Blue MAGA to do what needed to be done. The price of eggs comes down, not below 2023 levels, but back to 2023 levels. Everybody pretends that that's acceptable because most people talking about the cost of living are only talking about it in an effort to score political points. And then when you do a show that actually highlights the cost of living from a lot of people my age and younger are really struggling to get by in this economy perspective, you watch people pretend like the economic problems got solved, and it just makes you want to scream. I'll tell you, it's why the show feels angrier right now, is because so many of the MAGA people that were right about the economy not being great under Joe Biden are now completely silent and pretending like their problems were solved. All because, I don't know, of the Olympics and trans people. Don't call them stupid. You will hurt their feelings and they will tell on me. But I'm struggling to find a second reason. 920-281-1150. If I could get that second reason, nothing about the transes, because deportation numbers aren't setting records. They're meaner. There's more Americans getting murdered in the effort to deport, but really not any kind of record-setting pace in terms of what's going on in the world of deportations. Explain to me how the economy is fixed. 920-281-1150. I look forward. I'm sure I will be inundated with responses between now and when I come back from break. We do have to go to that break. And if not, we're going to keep this conversation going on about what's happening overseas. Otherwise, I'd be happy to take calls and texts about people's thoughts on the matter. 920-281-1150. We'll be back. Outside the Box, Ben Cominos, WHBY, Political Voices Network. All right, we've returned. I was texting back and forth with my brother. He's very heavily involved in the real estate industry. And go figure, unlike one caller for this program, he will tell you that it's slim pickings. He says anybody he's selling to right now are married people that have two very high paying professional careers. And outside of that, that the sales market has slowed down. But he has his hands, he does some property management, he renovates buildings, he's a landlord. He's very much just completely engrossed himself in the real estate industry, which is good for him. He does very well with it. He's been sending me photos of the changes that he's been making in the living room, kitchen, so on and so forth. And then he sends me a text. He's like, "Yeah, here's how everything looks." He goes, "Still need to buy an oven." But that's the least of my worries. LOL. I'm literally getting one strictly for aesthetic purposes only, which is the most commonest thing I've ever read in a text message. But as you can see, I come by it honestly. For those of you that are newer to the show, this is true. I am a landlord back in Pittsburgh, and I owner occupied for 5 years. I lived in one of the units that I bought, and then I rented out the other one. And I would recommend. I realize that it seems kind of insulting now, given how expensive everything has become. But for any single individual that doesn't know how they'd own a home, I'd recommend trying to find somewhere. I realize it's not the same as it was in 2015, but trying to find a multi-unit that is affordable somewhere, live in part of it, and even when you're living in part of it, the rent you charge will still more than cover the mortgage that you have. I can't recommend it enough. The first time I moved out of it was when I moved here, and I rented it to a young woman, a young trans woman actually, who had been kicked out of her previous apartment for reasons that I'm sure you guys can speculate to. Not going to get into it now, and she calls me not 2 days after I moved out here, and she goes, "Did you know that your stove doesn't work?" And I said, "Honestly, I didn't, but I'm not surprised. I haven't used it once in 5 years." And then we had a good laugh about it, and I bought a new stove later that day and had it installed. But yeah, so come by it honestly. And I realize there's a bunch of you that know this fact about me, a bunch of you that maybe are hearing it for the first time, but yeah, not much of a cooker. I go out to eat. That's where I spend my money. It's the most millennial thing about me, but I wouldn't change it for any other reason. I asked a question before we went to commercial, asking about the economy, asking about what's better now, why you don't hear the same level of frustration about the economy, specifically coming from the people who were willing to complain about it during the Biden years. Carlos hit me up during the break. I know he wants to answer the question. I don't know where he's going to take it, though. So what's up, man? What's on your mind?
Hey, good morning, Ben. Yeah, so I, in addition to the eggs, the eggs are fine now. We've got the president that the right wanted, so the eggs came down, yet not to pre-23 prices, but at 23 prices, same as they were under Biden. But now they're better. But under Biden, it was a crisis because of the silo. If it's from Trump, it's fine. If it's from Biden, the sky is falling. So conversely, right now, the gas prices, we are at the precipice of flat earth. We are about to fall off the edge. All is lost. We cannot begin to see tomorrow because of the gas prices. Yet, the gas prices back under Biden were not so hot.
Right.
And we enjoyed them dropping. But now, because if you're on the other side of that coin, now it's the end of times. It's because of the silos, and it's the low-hanging fruit we're taking. We're biting on all this stuff, and we're blaming other people. You've talked about this, and I appreciate when you break this down, where family members are having fights and, dissolving relationships over this political, theatrical BS, when at the end of the day, people can't even use our infrastructure we pay for because these twits, I will never speak of them with any level of respect ever. These congressional parasitical twits are playing their games. They think they're above the fray and they are in this aristocratic class. that does not have to succumb to then what we are meant to suffer, yet they have the ability to dictate how it goes. And they're toying and going against anything to do with public service. This is unacceptable, both sides. Yet we don't really call them to account on it. We stay in our silos, point fingers, get upset over eggs and gas and all this nonsense that we tolerate if it's from the right side. And they sit back and they're looking at us like, oh, yeah, it's working. This is good. Just keep playing the game. Whereas, and I know I'll say it again, and I know this isn't reasonable, nor would it really happen, but God, would I love it. Fire every one of them.
Yeah.
That is pain I would suffer for long-term gain. Every one of you, gone.
I like that, actually.
You're gone.
You know what's interesting is I'm noticing a very coordinated effort. I don't know if you remember Rahm Emanuel. He was the chief of staff under Obama. Oh, yeah. And I'd argue that he led the Obama presidency in the direction that ultimately resulted in Trump. If you look at a list of the top 100 most popular Democrats, I don't think he's in the top 80. But he is currently on The View as we speak. I have 12 TVs in front of me, and I see him on the air on one of them. There has been a complete media pushing him to the forefront. They're like, man, there's a lot of buzz around this guy. They manufacture the buzz around the people that have created the systems that you and I highlight often, and then pretend that it is organic buzz, much like I say about voter fraud. One guy complains about voter fraud, and then media will be like, a lot of people are complaining about voter fraud until 40% of the public just rolls with it. And you're watching it now. Like, this is how these systems ensnare us, is it seems organic to people that aren't paying attention. And for all the faults that come with social media, I'd argue the one thing that it does is I think it kind of removes the veil from anybody willing to pay attention. And that's a big capital willing, because that's not everybody. But for anyone trying to get better, I think there's alternatives there now.
Yeah, and if I may, just I like having thinking of a solution. Again, not reasonable, but my unreasonable idealistic solution to any time a budget, not a continuing resolution. You don't get to give me the outline of your paper. You have to write the paper. If you fail to do it, you have 30 days. 30 days, Congress doesn't get it done. At that time, all taxation stops, congressional pay stops, every other government employee is getting paid. They're on the clock, 30 days, get a budget done. If you don't, you're all gone. And then we recycle. Yet the people are taken care of. Those in charge who, defecate the bed, yeah, they pay. Serious consequences, perform or be gone, period.
I love it. I think you could probably win on that platform, Carlos, and I wish you good luck with that. You take it easy, all right? Yeah. All right, bye. I think he's got a shot with that one, I'm just saying, but I think there's a lot of people on board with it. What's interesting is Brian out in Fremont hit me up prior to that phone call, and I think the sentiment that he has shared with me here, and I'm not holding it against him at all. And for all I know, this is him calling right now. But I actually know we'll do the call first, then I'll get to Brian's text. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, this is Brian.
I called it. Call. Yeah, all right. Yeah, what's up, man? What you thinking?
Well, I love this show for a lot of reasons.
Don't blame you.
You do have a very large group of people who are diverse in their ideas. But the one cool thing about this show is that it is informational. And the sad part about America right now is that, you take the cross section of who listens to this show or who goes out and tries to learn. I would bet you there's a good 50% of people that have no clue what's going on. And that's the sad part, because they're making decisions for everybody.
Oh, right. We forget, because like you very rarely will miss an edition of this show, Brian, and I love you for that. But There's a lot of people that For the midterms, forget about it. They're just going to show up on election day. For the presidential election, that's when they get serious, and they'll start paying attention 3 days before election day. And like realistically, everything we've done for the 3 years and 57 days otherwise, realistically, is aimed at people that intentionally try and stay informed. And I cut slack for millennials and Gen Z more than most people in my line of work, and I will happily admit, I think it's trending in the wrong direction. I think the people who are informed are more informed than ever, but there is a much larger percentage of people that have just straight up checked out of what's going on. And you know what's crazy, Brian, is probably in a lot of ways they're happier for it. But ignorance is bliss, as they say.
Yeah. I sometimes take offense to the fact that you dogpile on the boomers, but I'll give you a little slack on that.
Well, stop sucking.
Since I'm a boomer,
stop sucking. Then that would be my suggestion.
Thanks for the show.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I appreciate the call. Yeah, and I get his point. And he actually messaged me. I didn't get a chance to read the text beforehand. But he says, Ben, you know how much I dislike the current choices for president that have been presented for 28th, but I will probably vote for Barney the dinosaur versus any MAGA candidates, as I want to see this MAGA movement crushed, boxed, burned, and buried in the backyard. This bunch cannot answer one question without each person contradicting the other. That was probably in relation to me sharing what Marco Rubio said the goals were of our Iranian conflict yesterday compared to what the president said they were a month ago, and just how much they have changed and evolved, leading me to believe there really wasn't a game plan going into it. And barring a complete cessation of critical thinking, I think anybody who sees the way they're talking about this would be hard-pressed to convince anybody that there was an actual game plan before all of this started. And I think it's a very frustrating thing for a lot of people, Brian included, to contend with. And again, it is to my chagrin, because all polling, and I put no stock in polling data in 2026 in terms of 2028 presidential polling, but all polling data right now has Gavin Newsom at the top and Kamala Harris right behind her in terms of Democratic candidates. And the thing is, I think they can win. I think they can win pretty easily, because so many independents are going to be like, you know what? Dude's clearly a greaseball, but these people do not have an agenda. Like, at least I can point to what Democrats want to do. You can talk about whether it's a positive or a negative. I cannot point you towards, assuming Republicans maintained a trifecta, what else is on the docket other than making it harder for women to vote? What else is on the docket for a Republican-controlled government were they to be given 2 more years? I can tell you that Joe Biden tried to negotiate the price of drugs for all Americans, and it was blocked by Republicans. I can tell you that there were efforts to eliminate airport fees, eliminate overdraft fees. There was an effort to crack down on monopolization with Lena Khan and his FTC. I can point to things trending in the right direction that had nothing to do with culture war issues. What would MAGA's game plan be were they to be gifted 2 more years of trifecta control? That kind of sums it up right there, does it not? That's why, to Brian's point, I think there's a lot of people that do not like the Democratic Party that know that they're going to be able to waltz into this. And I actually wrote an op-ed for the Minocqua Brewing Times, you can check it out on Substack, about specifically this, highlighting that Democrats are going to be able to win in November as well as 2028 while learning nothing, by assuming that, yes, we can orange man bad our way into at least winning every other presidency. And that should be good enough to do the nothing that we intend to do. It drives me nuts, but the only way that we can get some type of real transformative change coming from our government is if we acknowledge things aren't really trending in the appropriate direction right now. And you can be mad about something trans or law and order or whatever. You cannot take away from the fact that economically, while not good, we were trending in the right direction. We are not doing that by any metric in 2026. We got a whole bunch of text piling up here. We're going to squeeze that into the final segment of the show. We got Scott. I don't think I have a name on this one. DSL and Lenny. All you guys, anybody else, 920-281-1150. And we will be back in just a little bit. You're listening to Outside the Box with Ben Cominos here on WHBY and Political Voices Network. All right, well, we're going to have a bit of fun to wrap this show up today. First of all, shout out to Scott, says going to be writing Carlos in for the next presidential election. We've got another number here. I don't think we have a name on it. Just says Carlos is sane. DSL says Carlos is too kind. Congress shouldn't just get their salaries withheld. They should be fined a certain percent of their net worth. Claw back that dirty money. All valid suggestions, and I appreciate the thought nevertheless. However, Brian called and left such a nice phone call for me. I think there's a chance that maybe one of Tom Tiffany's handlers or something got a hold of this program and was listening today. So shout out to Neil in the emails, the real deal, James Neal. His name's not James Neal, by the way. That's a former Penguin. He, in fact, wasn't the real deal. He was a bit of a bust. But I want to read the comment here, and I'll allow you guys to be the judge. All right, far be it for me to insert this leftist drivel into your minds. I'm just going to read his comment and allow you guys to figure out which one of us you're going to believe. I'm going to be very blunt here. What kind of trash radio show is Outside the Box? Nothing but a brainwash, lying, leftist garbage program, I reckon. Obviously designed for the mentally delusional idiots who vote Democrat. It's democratic. That's how I know you're stupid. And have Trump derangement syndrome. I hope your numbers tank. As a radio station, misspelling, you should proofread when you're writing in anger. And it's just another reason why I think your programming is complete garbage. Pushing the leftist lies and ideologies is truly destructive to our society, this country, and our freedoms. Our freedoms are at stake, according to Neil. You should truly be ashamed of yourselves. Thank you very much for your thoughts, Neil. Although, unfortunately, to quote one of your favorite podcasters, facts don't care about your feelings. When I highlight the cost of living crisis, when I highlight the diminishing job numbers, when I highlight that our dementia-ridden orange jackass of a president started a war of choice for no reason other than he fell for the lies coming from Israel in the first place, when I highlight the fact that objectively nothing is getting better, when I highlight the fact that Donald Trump's ICE agents are murdering Americans in the street while operating with impunity, when I highlight the fact that every single thing that Donald Trump ran on has borne out to be a factually 100% inaccurate statement. That isn't Trump derangement syndrome. That is the unfortunate reality of living in Donald Trump's unfortunate reality. And the fact that you struggle hearing these statistics, Neil, is the actual Trump derangement syndrome that is weighing this country down. Guess what? When I voted for Joe Biden 15 times in the 2020 election, I knew that I was saving this country from the trash-ass outcomes that come with a president like Donald Trump. Waka waka, MAGA. Facts don't care about your feelings, and I hope you appreciate that. We've got 1 minute and 10 seconds, and I'm really hoping he's calling right now. Hello, you're on Outside the Box.
Hey, Ben, I'm kind of a geography buff, and I thought
60
you might
seconds.
be mistaken when
60
you made the
seconds.
comment about how many square miles Israel has taken from Lebanon versus
I never said anything about square miles. I said percentage of the land.
Oh, percentage. Okay, all right, I got you.
Yep, thank you very much. Yeah, what are we going to do here? All right, guys, I'll tell you what. Download the WHBY app. It's got trash programming like this and plenty of other options. 920-281-1150. Or search at WHBY, Google Play, or the App Store. We've got a YouTube channel. We had double-digit concurring viewership for the first time for most of the show, which is a nice feeling. It's at Ben Cominos. Go ahead and search it. Subscribe, please. That always helps out as well. And, of course, we're going to be available on the Political Voices Network at 1 p.m. today with a couple of extra bells and whistles added in. And I'm going to come back tomorrow. We're going to dunk on Neil even harder. Talk to you then. Nikki or Nancy's up next, Outside the Box.